Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Build Forward event. We're so glad you're with us today. We're here to talk about AI in construction. And with me, I have some of the best guests you could imagine for this conversation. So let me ask my guests to introduce themselves. Brian, we'll start with you.
Yes, Brian Moore. I am president and co-founder of Kahua.
And I'm Hugh Seaton. I'm an AI consultant and author.
So gentlemen, let me just ask, let's back up a second. And I contend that a couple years ago when I was at conferences and at different industry events, the conversation about AI was mostly, what's the big deal? And then we kind of transitioned last year. It was, is this thing real? And it was a scary proposition. All the talk was about futures and about the risk of AI. And now it seems like the conversation is about how do we get our arms around this? So Hugh, what's your take on this? What have you been hearing about this year, and how is that different from what you've heard a year or two ago? This is really all you talk about all day for the most part. This is your topic. You are the premier expert on AI and construction. What's your take on our conversation today versus what it was a year or two ago?
Yeah, well, you're right. It is something I'm pretty passionate about. What we've seen this year is a lot more focus on actually implementation. So at the beginning of the year, a lot of what was coming out of Silicon Valley was things like evaluations and just ways to make sure that you've got some guardrails around the AI. Last year, it was all promise and, hey, look, this thing can do something cool. Obviously, it'll do everything I want. And then people realized it can't. And a lot more work has gone into productizing and making it useful. So I think we're not done with this, though. I think going from a basic technology like AI to something that you can use in 100 different ways is going to be a process, and we're not done with that process, but we're making some good progress. So we've a really big difference in this part of 2025 versus 2024 is there's plenty of hype still, but there's less talk about some nebulous future and a lot more talk about specifics and what can we do and where is it not working. Again, we're kind of halfway through this. I don't know about halfway, but we're partway through this. And I think next year you'll start to see even more of that. Things that are in the works today will actually see fruition next year and, of course, the year after and so on.
Yeah. Brian, does that echo in your experience as well, that the conversation's kind of ramped up a bit?
Yeah, I would agree. Again, last year, you got an email every single day about a conference to attend about AI. Every single conference, it was the main topic. But the one thing that's just been very interesting is I think a lot of companies got ahead of themselves in terms of the ones that are providing AI to the marketplace. And I think we've seen a little bit of a retrench in terms of the offering. I think a lot of companies are now really in beta mode. I think a lot of people were out there, as Hugh said, with this big promise of what AI can do. But in actuality, it was almost like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's get into beta mode with all these customers and better understand the impact that it's going to have.
So Brian, Kahua is not your first software company. Your third, I believe. You've brought some technology to the market before. Can you give us a bit of your historical perspective? Having done this before, having kind of seen this ship come into the harbor once or twice, what's your take on this historic precedent that we're seeing? Because I believe we are in a historic moment here. Not all these things that come in front of us wind up playing out. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I had the opportunity when everybody was utilizing LAN, which is basically you had to go to the office to print something back in 1994, to where we introduced the first internet project management system in Constructware. And basically, from there, we also had a lot of hype and noise around blockchain, and we had a lot of hype and noise around BIM. So when you evaluate those three, I think it's just a great example that we could learn from history. With respect to BIM, very successful for design and construction. But from an owner's perspective, it didn't live up to the hype. Yeah. As soon as you got that model from planning and design and construction, there was so much segregation of data. There really hasn't been much value from that perspective. And unfortunately, and very interesting though, the same thing with blockchain. If you go back to the beginning days of blockchain, there was the same amount of hype as there is today with AI. And I really don't know of many successful implementations of blockchain out there in the marketplace. But when you do look at the transition from LAN to internet, I think it's probably the most analogous in terms of very similar to, Land being, I'm working at the office, have to print something. And when you started having conversations with people about doing things on the internet, it was extremely foreign to them. And I think that's what AI was like last year for a lot of people. It was extremely, foreign to them. And I think when you look at technologies like this, I think we overestimate the impact in the short term, but we underestimate the impact in the long term. And I want to give you just 4 examples as to why I think the internet craze was very similar to what we have right now with the AI craze. The first point being the fact that every single company out there is an enormous amount of money. A lot of startups are happening. Same thing that happened during the dot-com craze. The only thing that may be a little bit different is in the dot-com craze, after 3 companies raised over $100 million, it was hard for anybody else to get money, for that vertical.
Yeah.
I think there was certain ingredients to be successful in the internet phase. If you were a startup, you really needed to have industry knowledge. What's interesting with AI is you really don't have to have that industry knowledge, but there's 2 other ingredients that are very critical. You got to have customers and you got to have data. And then the third thing I would point out is I think this is probably the most exciting time, because just like the internet phase, everything is up for evaluation. And what was interesting during the internet days, though, is we really did focus on people, process, and technology. I think one of the challenges, going back to like even the first question, is right now we're still focused so much on just technology. And we need to start adding the people and the process into the discussion. And I would also add another component is it's people, process, technology, and with AI, it's about data.
So Hugh, I want you to comment on that people first thing, but Brian, I'm going to come back to you again and ask, tell me more about companies needing to have data and needing to have customers. What's the predicament of a startup that has no customers or an existing company that has no data?
Well, again, I think the challenge when you think about everything about AI is being able to capitalize on the data that you have in your ecosystem. And therefore, in order for you to build a model, you need to be able to have access to data. And in order to have access to data, you must have customers. So I just think that's a short-term conundrum for some of those organizations. And that's compared to the time period in the internet craze. It's not a hurdle that they can't overcome, because there's a lot of great ideas that are being created. Just kind of pointing out a little bit of a challenge that they'll have compared to the internet time when you didn't have to have customers and data. Not
one they can't overcome, but it is a hurdle nonetheless. So in a serious one. Hugh, would you comment on this people first conversation?
Yeah, I whether it's people first or people part of the conversation, there's a few things that matter. One of them is, for the first time, we're seeing software that can do some of what people can do. And there's a temptation to want to automate too much. And I think what people will forget, especially when they're kind of talking about this in abstract, is people add value in the process. It's not just deciders at the end. So you hear this term human in the loop a lot, and it's usually not very well defined. But what they often mean is you get to approve it at the end. But the problem is with that idea, people are adding value along the way. They're adding value when they're seeing the work, whether it's in a Kahua or in a spreadsheet or whatever it might be. And I think when you lose that, you're going to lose an awful lot of the quality and a lot of the management of complexity. A quick example is, or illustration is, construction and management of portfolios is loaded with implications. So you change one thing and it's not a linear, okay, well then that other thing changes. Often it's 15 other things change. And that may not all be in the documents. A lot of that is because someone has done this before, they've heard a story, and humans are fantastic at that. And AI is not. AI is a statistical process that pulls things together. And if you've trained it on that, yes, it might be able to tell you that these two things are related, but you don't always know what you need to train it on. And that's where human experience and judgment is just irreplaceable. And within a time frame anyone cares about, we're not going to have AI that can do that. The second thing, Nicholas, is we're talking about putting something that can do some human functions into a process that until now has been all humans. So if you're not thinking about what people are doing and thinking about what they're going to be good at and what they're not going to be good at, you may wind up automating things that don't matter or that don't really add a lot of value. And you have to be remembering that people need to want to do their job and stay engaged. So thinking about the people and the process is, I think, critical, and maybe more so than was true with earlier software, where, if you think about on-prem into the SaaS or into the cloud, a lot of it was similar process, just a lot more convenient and a lot more effective. But now you're saying, do we want to rethink our process so it's more effective? And to Brian's point about everything is open to consideration, I hear that and I say, the way we do things, we have the opportunity to say, did it need to happen that way? There's going to be some contractual and risk-based reasons to keep some things the way they are, but can we skip steps? Can we do steps in different order? Can we connect steps that we just couldn't before? An example is, does design get more access to execution so that we can design better the next time? If you think about some of Kahua's clients who often do similar buildings more than once, AI will give you the ability to connect things in a way that would be hard to do any other way. That's just one thing. I mean, I think we've got some years of discovery ahead of us. And I really like that idea that all of it is open for us to reconsider.
Yeah, so Nicholas, let me just comment on what Hugh just said, because I think it's a very important point. Because again, when you look at last year, I think a lot of people looked at AI as replacing a lot of jobs. And I think people are coming to the realization that it's going to enable people, right? It's going to augment what people are doing. You still need that human element to validate what you're getting back from an AI. Again, whether it's a prompt that you're doing or where you're using agentic AI, you need to have somebody that validates the information that is coming back.
Yeah, I'm hearing that over and over again everywhere we go. I do hear the term human in the loop, but Hugh, you make a really good point. It can't just be at the end. Humans need to be part of the process. So you guys have really teed me up well for where I want to go next. Let's talk a little bit about policy and strategy. And what I keep hearing, of course, security is the biggest concern. Let's come back to that as the last one. But what about cost of AI? What's it going to cost us to implement this in our construction organization? And what about the adoption concerns people have? Any thoughts? First of all, let's talk about cost. What should people expect how is it going to impact their income?
What we can expect is over the next 3 years, the cost of the kind of core compute, the inference, is going to go really low. It isn't really low right now. And the danger a little bit is, if some folks, especially on the IT side, will remember what happened when you went on the cloud and you had an AWS account and you'd get these crazy bills because you were paying per SIP or per use. And it's like, who's using it this much? And sometimes somebody wrote the code wrong and it looped and it did crazy things, but it was kind of about 10 years ago, it was very common. For some reason, it always seemed like it was a $10,000 bill that you didn't expect. But more specifically, IT teams would be like, we just blew our quarterly budget in the first month. So I do think that you need to pay attention to it and be thoughtful about what model you're using and so on. And the delta between the most expensive models and the not most expensive, some of the older models is huge. And honestly, a lot of what you need to do, you don't need the top of the line model anymore. Like, the best models are often way more powerful than what you need if it's just summarizing a document or doing some simple data things. So I think from a cost perspective, I wish there were a clear answer. What I will say is you should expect that your non-technology costs should be a multiple of what your technology costs are. And I say that because, certainly in the beginning, for the reasons we just said, if you're going to want to get the most out of this, you're not going to plug it into what you do already and say, this is SaaS plus, some sprinkles. You want to say, how do we look at this so that we're driving real bottom line differences to our business as opposed to a little efficiency here and there? I think we lose when we say you're going to be a little more efficient. It's more like, what could you meaningfully change about risk? And maybe it's just, hey, if you just had fewer claims and fewer disputes, that's an enormous gain already. But also, hey, can we maybe get a lot more out of the people we have already and have them doing higher value, work? And maybe I don't need 5 of them, maybe I need 4. Now, again, it's not replacing people. It's more like we can do more. We can assess more deals. We can, take in more bids, whatever, for the construction side. So I think that the way to think about this is not a purely technical equation. It's what are we on the top line? Are we growing our top line because we can do more? We can say yes to more. We can assess more. Are we doing fewer deals that maybe didn't make so much sense because we can assess them more, or at least look at more of them? And then on the cost side is, can we get more done with the same number of people, or even as time goes on, fewer? I do think that the thinking in terms of pure efficiency also, you're just seeing that less than you think. I think that there's been a little bit of fuss in the market about AI layoffs. And the truth is most of those layoffs were going to happen anyway, and they're using AI as an excuse because it makes their stock price look better.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, it's really important to think of AI more holistically than you might have other technologies, because it really can have a bigger impact. And that's the promise. That's why there's so much money and excitement. It's not just another efficiency gain. It's a how do we step change what we can get done gain.
Brian, Kahua will be an AI provider, but we're also an AI buyer. And you've set up an organization around AI inside Kahua. What's your take on the investment of AI for an owner of construction or for a constructor?
Yeah, again, I think this is where we got history to our advantage. If you go back to every single technology, up front, there's just an exorbitant amount of cost. There's a lot of unknowns, but in a very short period of time, that cost structure dramatically reduces. And I think we're seeing that right now. But I think the challenge that we're going to have is not so much the cost, it's the fact that it's right now, at least the way it is priced, it's a variable cost, not a fixed cost.
Mm-hmm.
In this industry, when you start looking at things and assigning them to a project, they love to have things as a fixed cost,
Absolutely.
not a variable cost. But I think that'll be a challenge for the industry itself, and I would echo what Hugh said. From my perspective, hopefully we get into 2026 and we're not talking about the cost of AI. Again, we're not talking about the technology. Hopefully we're starting to talk about the return on the investment. Hopefully it's not a cost equation. It's truly we're transforming our business. We're dramatically improving business processes. We're freeing up our resources. So hopefully it just doesn't become, because right now it truly is just a cost part of the equation. And hopefully we'll be able to start balancing it out and demonstrating to the marketplace the value proposition that AI will bring to their business.
All right. So one more question about before we go to the security concerns, and just about adoption. What if an algorithm contradicts all my years of experience and my gut feeling?
If you are a professional and an algorithm is contradicting or saying something you don't like, you need to ask what data you gave it, but definitely don't trust it. I would absolutely say there is no model I've ever heard of that is so all-wise and all-knowing that it's going to be better than someone who's been doing this a lot of years, for a couple of reasons. One is just architecturally they are where they are. But another one is they're not in the room for lots of things that go into a real decision. I mean, every business process is, 80 to 90%, well, it depends on the process, but lots of it is verbal. Lots of it is person to person, where you're making judgments based on confidence and other factors. So my first answer is question the algorithm and ask yourself, have we put things into it? Have we asked a question in a way that it's giving me an answer I don't trust? Not, golly, I must be wrong. Your first assumption is that you're probably right. And you're probably going to want to use that to say, how do we retune the model or the way we're using it so that it's giving me more useful answers? Now, if it's telling you something that is a different direction, or I think there's a creativity side of this where it's giving you some things you might not have thought of, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's only an input. We are nowhere near a place where AI is ready to be an output, to be the final thing. It is an input to human processes, not an output. So you're saying, I hadn't thought of that. Why might that be true? Why did it tell me something that is far off of what I would have thought? And maybe I didn't think of something, so that's fine. But probably what it was given or how it was tuned or something about the way it's being used just isn't right. So there should be no insecurity because of what AI is telling you.
I've heard you speak before about security and other pillars that you think should be the baseline for anybody's strategy as we approach bringing AI into an organization. Will you speak a little bit about, what Kahua's principles were as we began to roll technology out in this way?
Yes, again, I think in the forefront for us, our two key tenets that we had were trust and security. And I think those are crucial from anyone that's evaluating an AI offering. Majority of the surveys out there say that executives are just concerned about where is my data going, who's using my data. I've got a great example of a lot of owners talking about how they've got everything buttoned down within their organization, but they have their contractors exposing all their information in ChatGPT. So it's a very big concern for every organization out there in terms of where's your data going. More importantly, the ability of somebody to be able to come in and maliciously manipulate your data that you're utilizing. So security and trust are really critical. And we look at it from the perspective of everything should be privately hosted. Everybody has different opinions, but we think you shouldn't be commingling your data with other people's data. You shouldn't be commingling as a software company your data with your other customers' data. Majority of the customers that we speak out there, they only want you to be doing AI on their data set, not everybody else's. And so that's why I think trust and security is so important. And it goes back to looking at not who you are today, because everyone can say, trust us, or we have a secure platform. This is where actions speak louder than words. It's like, what has your organization been doing for the past 5, 10 years? Should be much more relevant and should be part of the evaluation.
I imagine that's another hurdle for that startup that you talked about before too, because they can, if they're a startup, they can't have a track record of trust from their client base.
Yes, and security. It's hard to go through the necessary requirements that you do, the controls that you have to put into place. Hugh's spoken about it a lot, the guardrails. It takes time to build that, just like it takes time to build trust. I had a conversation with somebody recently about, you can't build trust via AI. You build trust via relationships. You build trust by having conversations with people and what your actions are over the years in terms of what you do or not do with their data.
Well, related to that then, I think it was 4 years ago this week, certainly 4 years ago this month, where Kahua achieved FedRAMP authorization, or the notification that we would get FedRAMP authorization. I don't think it came until January, but so we've been for 4 years now the federal government's trusted source for project management tools. How does that FedRAMP authorization and our status there affect our ability to create new things with AI or inside our platform?
Well, I think the key thing there is the fact that we have all the controls already in place. And that's the most important thing. And the thing is, it's not a one-time thing. You said 4 years ago we've obtained FedRAMP status. As everybody knows, security is changing every single day. The controls change all the time. It's a massive investment. It's not a one-time event. So it's an ongoing thing, and we put ourselves in a position to where, again, back to trust and security, our customers feel comfortable that we are continuously putting their data in a secure place, and that we have controls in place that people aren't going to have, bad actors will not have access to their data.
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. I did make it sound like FedRAMP was something that we crossed off our list. That's something we live every day. It's something that we assess every day. We get audited every day. We continue to build every day. So very good point. I'm glad you made a clear distinction. Hugh, final thought on security around AI.
Yeah, I want to build on what you both said, and the fact that it's not once means it's about culture. So ultimately, it's embedded in the culture, because you have to be doing this all the time. And every developer, every technology person inside of a company like Kahua knows that they're going to need to get there. So they say security by design, trust by design. Well, you do that when you know where you need to get, as opposed to, oh, shoot, we just built this thing, let's redo it because it didn't fit the, CMMC, or it didn't fit FedRAMP. So I think the culture is something that is really hard to replicate. It's really hard to scale. And I think that you find that at companies like Kahua in a way that's just not necessarily true everywhere else.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment I would like to make, because again, when you think about the past with respect to FedRAMP, a lot of that is with respect to security. But let's just say I'm a large owner. One of the things that's very frightening with respect to AI is you've established a strong brand in the marketplace. And I think that's probably the biggest concern for most owners from a security perspective is what could happen to their brand in the marketplace if something does get exposed. So a little bit different than maybe how we looked at security before, in terms of people maybe getting access to your data and doing things with it. There's also this element with AI with respect to, what my brand is in the marketplace.
Great points, both of you. I want to hear some examples of what is happening today. How can people be taking advantage of AI today? So Brian, I'll start with you and just ask you represent one company here today, Kahua. We build project management information systems. What are some of the things that Kahua is doing today that our users are beginning to take advantage of?
Yeah, so for us, it kind of falls into multiple buckets. One is just the efficiency bucket and looking at standard business processes. So we have an application around our asset-centric offering that we're able to take a phone and scan a nameplate and actually extract all the content on that nameplate instead of having to retype it. Again, most people in the field, you have gloves, you may not have access to that nameplate. So it makes that process a lot easier. The same thing with respect to punch lists, trying to make the overall punch list process more efficient. Instead of having to walk around and type up all that information, wouldn't it be great if you could record that information and then basically post that in your prompt and have it basically create all your punch list items for you? The other key thing that we are doing is, again, one of the key differentiators for Kahua is our K-Builder Canvas, which allows our customers and partners to be able to create custom applications to meet their unique business requirements. We have just announced the ability with K-Builder Canvas where we now have AI enabled it. So instead of it just being a developer that is building your application, now we have enabled an average user to basically use a prompt, natural language, and create an application themselves.
So you can speak a new application into existence.
Yes, which again, just like the construction industry, you have two challenges. You have design and construction. And so to have the ability to be able to use natural language and instantly see what your design looks like and rapidly iterate on that design and then take it to construction to actually build the application.
Wow, that's incredible. Hugh, outside of project management tools, what are the things that you've seen that have really made an impression on you?
Yeah, some of them overlap a lot, though. I think what you're finding with AI right now, tools that are in use and trustworthy are often very document-based because that's the large language models was the first to get really mature. So you're finding people say, where are there blockers in my job? Where am I wasting time, hunting through a long document or summarizing a document? One of the ones I like also is very often the way you show up is how in command of the information you are. And AI can write in 5 minutes, can write a quick briefing for you. So there's a non kind of process side to this where you can actually be a lot more in command of what you need to be for a meeting or for whatever it is you're doing. So I think that what you're starting to see is the ability to manage complexity is just really up a notch because you have access to it so much more quickly. Now, on the non-document side, you're starting to see some interesting things on the image. So you can create and edit images, and that's gotten pretty amazing in the last 4 or 5 months. Video's coming. They're a little short at the moment, but I think you're going to start to see some things on the marketing front that are really remarkable. You see some gimmicky things on LinkedIn and so on right now, but I think that's going to start to be pretty production ready. It's already good. It just takes a little more effort than I think it will. So I think that you're going to start to see a multimodal side to this. One of the weird things about AI is how multimodal it is, how it's not just, documents or data or whatever. It's actually able to do a lot of different things. And I don't know that we've fully wrapped our head around what that's going to mean, where a model can make a video for you to illustrate a point or make a graphic for you. You can do this in ChatGPT, not so much the video, but the image right now. And I think you're starting to see that. A kind of corollary to that is we're seeing probably too many people using off-the-shelf AI to do things that it's not ready for or maybe never will be. So you really need to be careful about putting construction documents into a chatbot, off-the-shelf chatbot, and trusting what comes out. I mean, if it helps you get something done quickly, fine, but be really skeptical about whether it's complete. Probably isn't making anything up, but it's very often going to miss something. Conclusions might be a little weird. I think that there's a whole shadow AI problem right now, and I'm not sure that's going to last that long. I mean, if you listen to what Brian just said, people with way better controls and guardrails are putting things in the market. It doesn't happen as fast as ChatGPT because the time is being spent to test it and vet it and make sure those guardrails work. So I think in a year, you'll probably see less day-to-day work, like especially kind of critical work being done in off-the-shelf chatbots. And right now, honestly, a lot of contractors are worried about the fact that they're people that are right out of school think they have an easy button. And AI is like everything else. There are no easy buttons in life. To really get something out of a technology like AI, you got to do the work. And it feels like it because, I wrote a bunch of essays in school, and it's okay if you made some stuff up. I mean, just the bar's a lot lower. In a real project, the bar's a lot higher, right? Like if you get something wrong, or more importantly, if you miss something because you dropped a spec book in there and it got 5 out of 7 things, those 2 things that were missing could be a claim down the road. So I think that we're in a place right now where it's still kind of exciting, all this cool stuff you can do with off-the-shelf tools, but you really need the maturity of a platform like a Kahua where you can trust what's coming out of it.
Well, I'm concerned because every construction meeting should start with a safety moment, right? And I've been concerned for quite a while now that we're going to misuse AI and we're going to get safety wrong, and that's going to cause a horrific problem. Hope that doesn't happen, but I hear social media commentators talk about 90% of social media now is AI slop, is the term that they use. It's slop created by AI, and it's of very low value, and poor quality, but I don't want to see that come into construction. What we do is too important.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be. I mean, I think we overestimate where any intelligence can get to. I mean, you can take the smartest person in the world, but if they don't know the rules and they don't know the information, it doesn't matter. So I think there's a little bit of an underestimation of what humans bring just naturally from experience that maybe we didn't write down, but it's what makes us good at our jobs, and an overestimation of what some super intelligent AI can ever do.
Brian or Hugh, I'll let either one of you decide if you have an idea. What comes to mind when I ask, what should construction industry consumers be demanding next from their AI providers?
So I think what's really exciting about what's coming is the ability to be able to consume content externally. We create a lot of PDFs in this industry. We create a lot of Excel documents. So it'd be great to be able to receive that PDF document and to be able to consume it into your application and automatically fill in all the information for you versus you having to retype the information over and over again.
All right, without the software company legalese, is that a hint of things to come?
It is. Again, there's great technology out there with Microsoft, with MCP, Model Context Protocol, that is going to enable that technology. But again, I think the key thing is, how do we make it easy for the end user? Because every use case is a little bit different. I may have a request for change or a request for quote, a pay application. Each one is unique. Well, how do we do that so we don't have an individual having to go through 20 or 30 prompts? And again, that's where I kind of go back to, I think we kind of like overestimate the impact in the short term, but we got to start getting these use cases right and actually show the value that it actually saves somebody a lot of time and money versus them having to go through a lot of steps at this point in time.
Hugh, what should we be demanding next?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little more technical and say that if you look at a result of a survey and you think like that, you're going to want to know what's the margin of error. And in some ways, AI way under the hood is statistics. I mean, it's obviously an awful lot of statistics and math, but I think that teams should know what the variability is. They should know, like, how did you evaluate this? How often is it getting things wrong, and so on. And that's a dashboard. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but the truth is the teams building software are doing this sort of thing anyway. So, exposing that and saying, we ran this 50 times or usually a lot more than that, and we're finding that it's 97% right. So giving people confidence in the results of the evaluations and testing that got you, because no one wants to see software testing. That stuff is, the normal software testing. That shouldn't be anyone else's problem. But because AI is probability and not kind of a bunch of instructions that work or don't, understanding that we've gone through this evaluation step and here's what we got, I think is something people should be asking for in 2026. Obviously not every user, but the gatekeeper of a company, the IT team, the innovation team, whoever it is, should expect that. They should have access to, I believe that this is quality, and I can trust it with my teams, because you've opened the kimono, so to speak, and shown us that your own testing and your own results. So if that is starting to be demanded, or at least asked for a little bit. And there's some good tooling out there that makes that easier. So it would have been really hard to do 6 months ago. It's a lot easier to do now, just because, as I say, this has been the year of evaluation and productization. So a lot of that stuff is so much easier to do now than it was. So I think that, just like I say, if you're going to consume anything statistical, you're probably going to want to know how accurate it is. This is an analogy, is to say that with AI, it'd be good for people to be able to say, of these tools, they've vetted it to death, and it's at this % of likelihood, or of accuracy.
So let me add something to what you said around statistics. I think this is really important because, again, in any large program that is out there, there's just so much data. And hopefully AI in a short period of time will be able to help us better predict risk. We have so many applications, and if we can have all this data pulled together, hopefully it can tease out information that the average user is not able to see, so we can better understand where the problems may come, but then more importantly, inform all the constituents, contractors, owner, financial institutions, and insurance companies, so everybody better understand the risks that are in front of them at this point in time, so we can actually take action on them and be proactive and try to solve them.
Nicholas, I got one more.
Yeah, please.
Very much off of what Brian just said. Users should be demanding that all of their documents are consistent, which is absolutely insane to say. If you think about the hundreds and thousands of documents, there should be no more conflicts between them. Obviously, there's a lot involved in that statement. There's 1,000 RFIs and so on, but okay. But there shouldn't be drawings that don't match the specs. There shouldn't be, you name it, the contract should be reflected throughout. And if there aren't, it's a decision where you said, we're going to live with this because we don't want to have to pay to change that thing or do a change order, but nevertheless, you're aware of it. And we're not there. It'll take a while to do that, and a long time to do that reliably. But if there's a thing that I would say, in addition to those dashboards, is we should never have conflicts between documents anymore.
Or another point on that is the ability to do compliance checks across those documents and assets that are being submitted. Do we have a compliance check that's what was spec'd?
Yeah.
Excellent. There are a lot of AI apps being pushed out into the construction space. Here are some of the things you need to ask these companies before buying their tech. Where is the data stored? What country are your servers in? Are you using this data to train your models, or worse, someone else's? Is customer data getting mixed together? So Hugh, Brian, are there other questions that consumers in the construction space should ask before they buy AI technology?
I think it's really important that a company does a self-assessment of how well they have changed when they've implemented other software products in the past to help them with this change management process with AI. Because again, it's not just about the technology, it's not just about that app, it's about your people and your processes and how well of an organization is our organization in actually going through that change management process. The one thing I would say that companies need to start embracing, you need to be a continuous learning organization. If there's anything that people need to know about AI, if you're not continuously learning, if you're not continuously adapting, if that's not part of your DNA as a company, I think it's going to be very challenging for you in the future.
And I think a lot of those issues are often less of one than it might seem. Really, we're at a point where how are you implementing this? And as I say again, how are you evaluating? You have to remember that models on their own are kind of statistical machines that'll spit out things unless you're giving them the right guardrails. So what's the process of evaluating this? Do you have experts? So one of the points that gets missed a little bit, I think, is you need users to be like normal software developers can do the testing because did the instructions do what they're supposed to or not? But right. AI is a pipe for content. And what comes out of it may or may not be right. It's probably not going to be factually incorrect, but it may not be useful. It may be missing something. There's a bunch of ways it can go wrong. So the question is, how are you evaluating the quality of results that your AI is giving us? Do you have experts? Do you have subject matter experts? Do you have people that are from the field if it's a field application? Do you have designers if it's design related? That's really important because, again, it's not just a question of being factually correct or not. It's about being useful, or otherwise, what have you done? So that's a really good question is how are you evaluating this?
All right, excellent advice. Our closing advice, what if I'm late to the game? What do I do, Hugh?
You're not late to the game. There's a lot of anxiety out there where people are seeing what's going on and they're like, oh my gosh. But what I would say is obviously adopt a Kahua and say, hey, I'd like to be on the beta program. See, Brian? But what I would say is if you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, go and use one of the off-the-shelf tools for your personal use. Go plan something this weekend. Start to see what it's good at, what it's bad at.
Brian, what if we started out without a plan and now we've made a mess? What's your advice?
I think a lot of us are going to go through in this journey and have a lot of missteps. Everything is changing so fast. And again, I think the core is understanding in your organization, what are your principles? What's your objective? And I would focus very much on bringing somebody in, like a Hugh Seaton, and have him train your organization. Again, you have to become a learning organization when it comes to AI. I think the best thing you can do is get all your employees, get all the fear out, and just train all your employees on AI. Get them a base comfort level. I think that would be a good starting point.
Excellent. Well, with that, gentlemen, we'll wrap it up. Brian, Hugh, thanks so much for being part of Build Forward. It's been a great afternoon. Glad you've been part of it. Glad to have had this time with you.